Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome. This is our career chat on data and analytics. And first off, I want to be sure to thank our center alums. We're fortunate to have two center alums who work in the field, and so we want to thank them for taking time out of their professional day to be with us. So what we're going to do, just to kind of give you a layout, each of them are going to talk a little bit about their career path, about the field in general, and then at the end, we're going to leave some time for questions and answers. So when we get to that, please feel free to ask questions. So without further ado, we have Lauren Foley, and Lauren is a senior analyst in sales and performance analytics at ADT. She was a math major and graduated in 2013 from Center. She also has her master's in analytics from North Carolina State. Is that correct? Can you not hear? Oh.
No, I can hear you. I muted myself for a minute.
Oh. Scared me to death. I'm like, oh, we tested the sound. So she's with us, and then we also have Cyrus Shee. He is a data engineer at Facebook, and he got his computer science degree at Center in 2014. So Lauren is going to kick us off, and welcome, Lauren.
Hi, everyone. So I work for ADT Security, and they're based out of Boca Raton, Florida. So I'm actually in a hotel in Texas right now, and I will warn you, I'm here with both of my dogs, so they might bark during this. Hence the muting the microphone. But so I graduated in 2013. I got my degree in math, and I got minors in computer science and education. And originally I thought I would want to teach math, and I started at NC State in their grad program for education. I took about 2 classes there, and I was doing it part-time and working part-time as well, just waiting tables and odd jobs, kind of trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do. And I really started enjoying the stats classes I was taking. So I guess the first piece on my career path was going to grad school at NC State. So the really neat thing about the analytics program with NC State is it's a 10-month program. So you have your master's in less than a year. That's a lot less student loans, but it is a full-time program. So you're basically there from 9 to 5, and it's a very involved program. So it's a lot more like working in the actual field, and a lot of grad programs for analytics are starting to be this way. They'll have it a short turnaround, and you take a bunch of classes and kind of drink from the fire hose your whole year in grad school. But I think the best part about it is that they do what they call a practicum project. And a lot of other programs you'll see, sometimes they call it like a capstone project or something like that. But you basically work on a project for an actual company. So I worked on a project for M&T Bank, based out of Buffalo, New York. And I worked for them the whole time I was in grad school. They gave us a problem at the beginning of the program, and then our final presentation was right before graduation. And so the project I did for them, are any of you familiar with like the Dodd-Frank Act and CCAR that they put in place after the financial crisis? No? Okay, so after they had the big housing burst and everything kind of fell apart with the economy, the banks were required to pass certain regulations placed by the Fed that basically show what would happen to their financial situation based on different macroeconomic scenarios. So if we have a housing crisis, or if the banks are running out of money, if people aren't spending, if people default on their loans, what's going to happen to that bank? and they have to do this every year and submit their actual models. So that opened up a lot of analytics jobs because now they have to have all these models submitted every year. So a lot of people I know do work for banks in those types of projects, which it's really cool. It sounds kind of boring, but you can do some really interesting modeling and data analysis with the banking data. So from there, I went on when I graduated. Well, I'm back up a second. So NC State has a really good program, but a lot of different schools also have the like 12 to 18-month program. So you don't have to be in school the rest of your life to get your master's in analytics. And I also have a couple of friends that are doing like the partial programs while they work. I know Villanova has a really good online program. And there are a few schools that do. So if that's something you're interested in, you have a lot of options. But I definitely recommend NC State. I'm a fan. Go Pack. And so from there, well, the other neat thing about them is they have almost 100% job placement every year. So that's kind of their big claim, is that they get all of their graduates jobs. So I did get my first corporate job through NC State, and I worked for Hanes, the underwear company, for 2 years out of grad school. And it sounds kind of strange, but they have a ton of companies worldwide. In Europe, they own the Champion athletic wear. Most of you got shirts and stuff from the bookstore. They own the companies that make those as well, Gear for Sports and Knights Apparel. So it's a huge company with a huge internal supply chain, which opens the door for a lot of other analytic needs. So the project I worked on for them was basically a demand forecasting project. So they make, if you consider an individual SKU, so any product that has, like a men's white V-neck size small t-shirt is one SKU. And they have 80,000 different products, and they make almost all of them. So we need to be able to predict what our customers are going to be ordering in order to make sure we make enough of the right stuff. So we built models that would forecast for each individual product, all 80,000 of them, every month. That's not something you can do manually. So we built out an automated system. You push run, and it delivers your results for you in under 8 hours. So that was a big change for them. Before they were doing it, literally, it was an Internet Explorer web app, which tells you anything about it. And they would just enter in the numbers each month for each product. And they had a team of about 50 people, and this was like their full-time job, was just typing in numbers into an Internet Explorer app, which is miserable and not a great use of anyone's time. So they definitely have big impacts. A lot of these analytics projects tend to be pretty big, high visibility, which is great for everyone who's interested in career. A couple of the other neat projects they worked on in retail, we had people predicting when they'd have a service issue. So when the demand would outpace the supply, and whether it be worthwhile to airship or pay extra in freight to get that product there. So that's moving more from like the predictive into the prescriptive realm. Here's what's going to go wrong when and what to do about it. So that sort of wraps up what I've worked on at Hanes. And now at ADT, I'm working on their new territory management program. And so what we do there, basically before they had sales reps driving all over a region to sell products. So for example, in Colorado, I think they had some sales reps who would have appointments 4.5 hours away in one day. So they can only make it to 2 appointments in a day because they have to drive out there, work an appointment, drive 4.5 hours, work another. So what we're doing now is more of a spatial analysis. We're looking at the demand in each region and grouping together like an individual turf that a rep would own, and they work any appointments within that turf. But it has to have a high enough demand to keep the reps interested, and it also has to still support like the whole team's budget. There are a lot of different constraints. So it's a pretty interesting process. I've been working there for about 3 months now, so I'm still getting my feet wet with it. But a lot to do, obviously, between financial industries, retail, and now security. I think that's the thing that I love about analytics is that it really can go across any industry. So it's not, people usually ask like, oh, well, do you work for a hospital? So you work in retail? It's like, well, no, I can really work anywhere. Now everyone has problems that they need big data to help them solve if they want to stay relevant. You can't just kind of do things by guessing or gut feeling if you want to stay competitive. So there's a lot of opportunities. It's really interesting. It kind of feels like full-time problem solving. Definitely high demand in the market right now. So I'll let Cyrus take it from here.
Sure. Thanks, Lauren. So I graduated from Center in 2014. Actually, initially, I was a philosophy major at Center. I took my first computer science course junior year with Professor Shannon. And then I just immediately fell in love with it. It was sort of a combination of like logical problem solving and as well as like concrete implementations. I could actually do projects and see the results. So after that, I switched to a computer science major, kept my philosophy minor. And I'd always been pretty interested in data. So while at Center, I did dabble a bit in like the online courses. I don't know if you guys have heard about MOOCs. So basically the free courses that Coursera and Udacity offer. So I took a few like machine learning and data analytics courses off and on. So after Center, I knew I wanted to go into the field of big data, also because I knew there's a lot of demand. So my first job, I got a referral from somebody I knew at Center, actually another Center alumnus, and ended up working for Fidelity Investments down in Raleigh, North Carolina. And there I worked on the customer personalization team. So a lot of big websites use what's called clickstream data. Basically, it's like aggregated web access logs. So when you go on a website and you click around, there's sort of a trail you leave of the various pages you're on and how long you spend on each one and that sort of thing. So at Fidelity, we had a huge amount of tables and data to work with. And there I sort of learned a lot about working with big data, and specifically that means data that's sort of not well structured necessarily, and also that has high velocity. So there's data that's constantly coming in, and you have different requirements as far as like how real time you need it to be. So some data you can do like a weekly analysis, but then other data you want to analyze it pretty much right away. And while at Fidelity, so just to give some background, I mainly was working as a software engineer at Fidelity, but I was working with big data. So Lauren's role is more of like an analyst or data scientist, but throughout my career, I've kind of been more on the data engineering or software engineering role. So that's sort of kind of in between a data scientist and a software engineer. So instead of directly looking for insights, data engineers usually build out sort of the lower end of the stack, the platform and pipelines and dashboards and metrics that enable insights for the customers who are usually like data scientists or like machine learning algorithms, that sort of thing. So after about a year and a half at Fidelity, I kind of wanted to move to more of a startup culture. Fidelity was great, but it was a pretty big company, and so there are downsides that come with that. We didn't really move that fast, and there's some bureaucracy. So my next job, I moved to a startup of about like 25 people, still in Raleigh. We worked on, at that startup, I was an explicit data engineer, and we mainly did healthcare analytics. So basically, we were trying to enter the patient survey space. So there are a lot of government regulations where hospitals and clinics have to survey their patients, but right now the state of the art is basically paper surveys that take months to go out, and they're often hundreds of questions long. So a startup I was at by Veris, we basically made it electronic, and we offered a lot more insights for hospitals to compare themselves with other hospitals and that sort of thing. So there I learned a lot because, you know, it's a very small startup. There's a lot of room for experimentation and risk taking. And also because there were never enough people for the problems we had. So I got to do a lot of sort of related roles, so such as DevOps and software engineering, and even some like product management stuff. So I stayed at Biveris for about just under a year, just learning a lot about data and about a more tech-focused and startup culture. And then during this time, I was still working on a lot of self-learning projects, so still doing online courses, some personal projects in my own time. And along the way, I'd also been contacted by recruiters from a lot of different companies. Analytics is very in demand. So I've always wanted to work for like Facebook, Google, or Amazon. And I did have a couple of interviews with like Google and Amazon. I got to go on site, but I was never really completely prepared for it. So in the tech industry, a lot of these interviews do require some preparation, especially if you're going for a software engineer or for a data engineer. And I mean, even for data scientists, you have to really know your theoreticals, your fundamentals. And so that would be like a center, that would be the algorithms course and the data structures courses. And so after I had not made it past the on-site interview for Google and Amazon, in earlier this year, I was contacted by a Facebook recruiter, and he was telling me about the data engineer role at Facebook, and I was really interested. And so I put in a lot of effort into studying for it. And now I'm at Facebook, and I work. So the nice thing about Facebook is they have a generalist hiring pipeline, so you don't apply for a specific job with a specific team. When you get an offer, then you go through what's called boot camp, and then during that process, you choose the team you want to work on. So I chose to work on videos. So right now I'm on the videos data engineering team. And we're basically working on all of Facebook's video products. So live, now there's Facebook shows, and then there's a bunch of projects around Facebook creators. And it's really interesting. I get to work with a lot of people who have been in the media space for a long time, a lot of people who have just ridiculous resumes as far as analytics, like PhDs in economics and math and that sort of thing. So I'm learning a lot at Facebook. Probably the biggest difference at Facebook versus Fidelity and the startup I was at is how much focus there is on impact. Nobody really cares when you come into work or how many hours you work, as long as you're sort of delivering. And part of that is you have a lot of independence, and the trade-off is that you kind of choose what you think will have impact. So at Facebook, you're kind of managing your own career, and that's a really nice thing, in my opinion. So, yep. I guess open up to questions.
Yeah. Lauren, did you want to add anything, by the way, Lauren? Just related to what Cyrus was saying?
I think one thing I would add, just as far as the computer science classes definitely helped me a lot as far as the programming aspects of things. And I took I am taking, Cyrus mentioned some of the Coursera courses. Those are really great. So in grad school and at Haynes, I worked mostly as a SAS programmer, but now we're shifting more into open source software. So I mean, I'd used Python in undergrad, at Center, we're trying to go more towards the R route. So I've been taking some courses in R online. They really don't take a ton of your time each week, and they're pretty helpful. So I think that's definitely a good thing.
Questions? Yeah. Go ahead.
So this is for both of you. What experiences as an undergraduate have best prepared you for your career path now?
Sure, I can go first. Yeah, so I guess there's two sides to that. There's the classes that sort of, I guess, explicitly prepared me. So those would be the obvious computer science courses, algorithms, data structures, intermediate programming, and then some of the math courses, especially discrete math and statistics. But on the other end, there's sort of the more less explicit experiences that prepared me. Like taking philosophy courses actually helped me quite a bit. When you're working in analytics, there's a lot of focus on being able to convey your insights and like what you're thinking clearly. So there's a premium on good communication, written and verbal, and I think as Center, writing all those papers that really helped a lot. So.
Yeah, I think I'd say probably kind of the same thing from my end. So definitely taking some computer science classes help, and also just trying to sort of think about the problems you're trying to answer as a whole. So I know a lot of times people answer a very specific question, but being able to look at the whole piece that you're asked to report on or answer, it's really helpful if you think like, well, what does this person want to know? If I were them, what would I want to know about this? What questions would I ask? And then go ahead and answer those kinds of questions ahead of time so you're prepared. So just being able to sort of use that problem-solving mindset. But also, and Cyrus, you probably experienced this maybe more at Fidelity than Facebook, but a lot of people in the data science field aren't necessarily very good communicators. And I think my education classes actually helped me a lot with that, being able to kind of walk people through my train of thought. But definitely the communication skills and social skills put you really above and beyond, especially if you're going to be client facing. So my role is kind of, I work sort of between like the data team and also the executive team. So I'm answering a lot of questions with data for like our CEO and COO, and you've got to be able to answer them very high level there. Some of the managers are going to want more detailed information. So just being able to be versatile and being interested in what you're working on.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think especially if you want to enter the tech industry, to be frank, good communication skills aren't in that high supply. So if you can code well and reason about data well, and also communicate well, that's sort of a comparative advantage. And then going back to what Lauren was saying about always thinking about the problem holistically, yeah, that's really important, especially at Facebook when somebody asks you to take a look at some metric or asks you to answer some question. It's important that you don't just do that right away. You should figure out why they want that data, and then maybe because you actually know their motivation, you can actually answer questions they don't even know they want the answer to. And I think that's pretty important.
More questions? This is your chance. Don't be shy.
So this is mainly for Cyrus, so also for Lauren. So for the things that you taught yourself, like as far as like self-learning, what really directed you as to what you should teach yourself?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think there's actually so many resources online that there's almost too many. It's sort of like choice paralysis. And so I frequent there's a tech sort of newsletter called Hacker News, and there's a bunch of data science blogs out there. And then there's a bunch of like GitHubs that sort of list the best resources for you to learn machine learning in 30 days or whatever. And I guess over time, you sort of learn what are the best uses of your time. And I do have a list of like curated resources that I can share if people want. But in my opinion, I think the common denominator as far as useful resources has been things that require me to actually work on things, on concrete things, not just reading something. I think when you're actually dealing with data and having to write code, like from scratch, you learn a lot more than if you're just reading somebody's like finished implementation. And in the process of like struggling to figure things out, you learn a lot more. So.
Yeah, I'd agree with. Sorry about that. A lot of noise in the hotel. So it's definitely more of what I've needed to learn. So previously I was SAS programming the whole time. Now I don't have access to SAS. So I have
Hey, Lauren, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, sorry. Let me move a little closer. So previously I was a SAS programmer, but SAS is a pretty expensive software and my new company doesn't have access to it. So I've been teaching myself R so that I can still do analysis. Also working with spatial data, I've been learning some ArcGIS, which is a pretty inexpensive tool that handles spatial data really well. So mine's mostly by necessity, but I also have some stuff on my like to-do list of things I'd like to learn, and that's usually from listening to podcasts or things that I'm just interested in.
This is probably more for Cyrus. You said that the interview process was really general, and then after you got hired, you picked the team that you work on. So like even though you wanted to work with data, your technical interview was, did you have to prepare like anything regarding data analytics or just like the data structures and algorithms?
Right. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I was a little bit unclear. So you do interview for a specific role, but as far as like what team you specifically be on, it's sort of that's determined after you get hired. So that's in contrast to companies like Amazon, where each team and each department sort of has their own recruiters and their own job roles, and they directly reach out to you. But like Google and Facebook, you go through the interview process, and then once you pass the hiring bar, any team in the company sort of wants you, and then you go through like a selection process. So for the Facebook data engineer interview, it was basically equal parts coding and SQL, and I found that to be pretty true across the board for other data engineering roles I've interviewed for. I can go more into detail with on this, how the interviews actually look like, if that's helpful. But
Yeah.
okay, yeah, okay. So let's see. So most interview processes in the tech industry are pretty similar. So the first step is usually you apply online or you get referred. Obviously, if you get referred, you have a much higher chance of getting a call back. And then after that, usually a recruiter will call you. There will be a short phone screen. They'll basically see if you're actually who you say you are and your resume is accurate. And then after that is the first technical screen, and that's usually about an hour to 2 hours. And that's just usually you're coding on a shared document or writing SQL on a shared document. The interviewer will ask you questions that are actually pretty similar to the ones you would get in an algorithms course. So they would ask you to implement quicksort or something like that. Or they would ask you something like some problem like write a function to determine if this string is a palindrome or something like that. And then that's usually about an hour to 2 hours. Then after that, you move on to an on-site, and usually tech companies, they'll pay for you to go out to wherever they are. So I actually interviewed with a number of companies when I was preparing for Facebook, and I flew to New York, then Seattle, then California in like the space of 1 week. And the nice thing about that is they pay for everything. You get there, the on-site is usually about 4 to 5 hours, so it is pretty intense. And usually each interviewer has like 1 hour to ask you whatever questions. And the important thing here with the questions they're asking is it's not really that crucial that you get the right answer. It's more important that you show that you can reason about problems in a systematic way. So it's really important that you verbalize your thought process and that if you get stuck, that you don't give up. Because often these questions, they're not really expecting anybody to get the optimal answer. They're expecting you to figure out a heuristic or a good approximate answer. And they want to figure out how you think when you're faced with something you don't have memorized. And then during these interviews, there are also behavioral questions. So those would just be like, tell me about your story, or tell me about a time when you encountered an issue on your team, something like that. So.
And I think for the data science perspective, you'll see a lot of that too, but it will be a little more across the board as well. So I've had some interviews where they've never asked me a single technical question, and it's just all very general behaviors. They look at your resume and say that like, oh, you have the technical skill set. We just want to see that you're a human being. And I've also seen some where they ask you to get up and start writing code on a whiteboard. So, I mean, it really does go across the board. But being prepared doesn't help. And it definitely, like Cyrus said, just focusing on communicating your idea and your train of thought. Oh, and I also really like to bother people on LinkedIn when I'm applying for jobs. I don't know if anyone else has done that, but sometimes I'll search for people that like might be on a team in that department or something and message them, let them know I'm interested, ask them if we can just chat about it. Most of the time people don't respond or say no, but the couple of times when people do say yes, it typically does give you a little bit of a leg up.
So one final thing I would add is the nice thing about a lot of tech industry jobs is that they're pretty meritocratic. So if you don't have the best GPA like me, or if you just have a bachelor's, or if they haven't even heard of Centre College, which to be honest, a lot of companies in California, they've never heard of us. It doesn't really matter if you can do well at the interviews and if you can show that you have the technical skills. So.
Mine's almost a little bit on my experience at least has been a little bit of the, not opposite, but there are a lot of data science roles that don't necessarily require like as hard of technical skills. They just want you to be able to communicate about data-driven processes. So like not everyone in an analytics role actually does real analytics. Some people are more of just like the link between the analysis and the people who need to understand it. So if like computer science isn't your thing, it doesn't mean that this isn't a career path you can look into. And part of that, so like my grad program, our grades were based mostly off of our peer reviews rather than our actual work, because a lot of people can do the work. Not a lot of people can be collaborative and communicate about it and be a good team player. So they're, play up your strong suit, really. There's something there for everyone, I feel like.
Any more questions? I have one quick question. Are there any like trade associations or publications in the field that would be worth paying attention to if you're interested in this field?
It's pretty decentralized. Data engineer is a pretty new role, and then data scientists. Like Lauren was saying, to be a data scientist can mean very different things depending on what organization you're in or what team. It can range from like analysts to machine learning scientists to data scientists who still have to like do some coding at the same time. So it's really a pretty broad space. As far as like general tech news, there's Hacker News. You can learn a lot just from keeping up with that. and there's just a lot of podcasts and blogs that you can find, but nothing central really.
So they did just start a program called not a program, it's an association called Informs. It's Information Management Systems, and it's a big acronym. But they started a certified analytics professionals group. And they also piloted, there's the associate certified analytics professionals. And so that one is for anyone who has less than 3 years of experience in the analytics field. I got to be part of the pilot program for that. So if it's something you're interested in, feel free to reach out. I did get my associate CAP, and then it will move into a certified analytics professional in, I guess I have 1 more year now. So that's something, but it's really not, especially I was recently interviewing for jobs, very few people asked me about it. So they're trying to be like a good certified group, but a lot of people still don't really know what it is. As far as just learning about it, I'll do a little shout out to, I think my favorite podcast right now is called Not So Standard Deviations. And it's actually there's a big like data science Coursera, what is it called? The specialization right now for data science, and Robert Peng, who does this podcast, teaches a lot of the classes on there. And it's really great. It's just a fun thing to listen to. I listen to it in the car a lot. It's pretty light, but I learn a lot through it.
Last chance for questions.
So I know there's, like, you mentioned it briefly with certification, but like there's other careers that are very similar to like data science, like actuary, that has like a lot more certification and tests. Do you find that other people in your field are taking these tests or doing something similar to that other than?
Yeah, I think right now the problem is a lot of these certifications, they're not that well known, and there's not that much sort of institutional backing. So like on Coursera or Udacity, you can like take courses and then get like a certificate that shows that you actually did it. But it doesn't really seem, at least in the tech industry, at least for tech companies, that they really place much of a premium on it. There's sort of this interesting backlash in the tech industry towards like credentials. It's like sort of the whole meritocratic culture, I guess. So you can, I think getting those credentials and certifications, they definitely help as far as showing that you are learning things in your own time and that you're passionate about something. But as far as demonstrating sort of technical mastery, they'll still ask you to, code or do data science. So still useful, but probably not as useful as a lot of other fields.
I think the part about actuary that makes me laugh a little bit. So part of, and Cyrus, I'm sure you have the same experience. If you're a data scientist or working in even like software engineering, data science combo type of stuff, a lot of people aren't going to understand what you do. And I've had a lot of people tell me like, oh, you should go get your actuary certification. There's so much job demand there. It's like, well, there's actually a lot of job demand in analytics too. I don't think I need to do that right now, but I think I agree, especially like the smaller and more tech companies aren't as into the certification. One thing that really does help show your, almost like a certification of your own sort of free-form way. A lot of people I know in grad school would work on side projects they're interested in. So even if it was like predicting your March Madness brackets, and like keep a little blog about it. And then you can show that, you can put it on your resume. Here are some of my side projects that I've done, and people who are going to take the time to do that just out of their own interest, it really shows their drive, passion. I think it stands out almost more than a certification to someone hiring in this field. I know a girl who had done that for March Madness, and then there are a bunch of projects that will get like in challenges, analytical challenges that will get posted online that you can partake in and just kind of keep track of your solutions in a blog or something. And I think that shows a lot to employers.
Yeah, I actually couldn't agree stronger with that. Yeah, side projects are a really big deal for a lot of tech companies. And like Lauren was saying, it's sort of like two birds with one stone. You're showing that you have passion and that you care about the work you do. And you're also showing, concrete proof of actual code you've written, so they can see, your code style, how you're writing about these problems, your hypotheses, like how you're thinking about it. And yeah, so having a portfolio and, putting it up on GitHub, they don't have to be hard projects, but just anything really, makes a really big deal. Every year, Google and Facebook hire a lot of people who don't even have bachelor degrees just on the basis of open source contributions or side projects. And then for data science specifically, there's a platform called Kaggle, where they're basically competitions where people compete to figure out the best predictions or results for a given problem. And those count for a lot if you're interested in machine learning or data science.
Okay, that's a lot of good info. Do y'all have any closing thoughts for us?
Sure, yeah, I'll go. So as far as closing thoughts, I think analytics is a really interesting space right now. There's such high demand, and there's so many ways to sort of enter the field. I think Centered sets you up pretty well as far as critical thinking and communication skills. And it seems like the common denominator among people who I know who have done really well in whether it's software engineering, data science, or fields in between is sort of curiosity and really like pursuing stuff on their own time. So whether that's taking online courses or doing a master's or side projects, a lot of that counts for a lot, and you can really learn a lot just on your own nowadays with how many resources are online. So if you're interested, I can help point you to different resources, and yeah.
And I think one of the recommendation I'd have, LinkedIn is really a powerful tool. I didn't have a LinkedIn in undergrad. That's something I think that'd be definitely helpful to build one of those out and start connecting with people I found my current job through LinkedIn. Definitely reach out to me and Cyrus too. Let's see what else. But yeah, just really looking at what you're interested in and also being really confident. I was really surprised when I started working at a big company, working at Hanes, just how much I was able to contribute right away. I kind of got in and thought, oh, I'm going to be like low man on the totem pole. What am I going to know about this? It's a big company. They've been running it for a long time. But that's part of the problem. A lot of people who have been in companies for a long time, they just don't really change with the times. And so bringing in new skills and a new perspective makes a really big impact. I think everyone can do a lot in this field.
Yeah, I agree. I found my last 2 jobs through LinkedIn, the startup as well as Facebook. So.
All right, thank you much. We appreciate it.
Good.